Welcome to this video where we are going to take a look at how to analyze labor market data. So the first thing I'll do is to click here on text, double click on it, and first come here where we have T. I'll click on it to have one hashtag, then it's going to give me something as big as that. If I click for a second hashtag, you see it becomes smaller and so on. So I'll go back to just one hashtag. I'll put my text here, analyze labor data, and I want it to be bold, so I'll click on bold. I want the whole thing to be bold, not just one, and that is it. I'll click out of it, or just shift enter, and I will send it to the top using this. Okay, click there, make sure it goes to the top, and that's it. Then here, the first thing you generally want to do when you are trying to analyze your data is to import all the libraries you are going to be using. So here we have Panda as PD. We are going to import NumPy. NumPy is simply going to help us generate some synthetic data or some fake data. So after doing this a number of these analyses on synthetic data, we are going to go on the website of Statistics Canada, import real data, and use it. But for this, I want you to learn how to create synthetic data. So we are going to import Panda, NumPy, Seaborn, Matplotlib, and we will set the style using the Seaborn. So Seaborn as SNS, we are going to use that to set the style. Let me slightly increase the size of this. Awesome. So that it's very visible. So now we want to first of all generate some synthetic data. So the first thing I'm going to do is to first of all define the variables we want to use. So I set the seed. So why do we set the NumPy random seed? We are going to have random data 42, so that if you set yours as 42, it's going to be identical to what I'm going to have. If you change this number or if you don't have any number, you will never have exactly what I have. But if you set your seed as 42, you'll have the same random data as me. So the first data I want dates, because we want to look at how unemployment, employment, labor force participation changes across time. So here we have dates. I use PD date range. We want it to start from 2022 to, well, from January 2022 to, I can actually say, I'll just put till the end of 2023, and the frequency is monthly. Now, these are the regions of Canada we want to examine. We will choose just a couple of provinces. We are not going with all the provinces. We take Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Now, we also want to look at at unemployment, employment, and labor force participation by age groups. Here we have the different age groups. If you go to the website of Statistics Canada, you will see these are the age groups they are using. These are some of the indicators we are using, just the 3 of them. Then we are going to look at unemployment, employment, and labor force participation by these 2. So here we simply create the different lists. These are just normal Python list. Then what we are going to do is now to run our code. We will use a for loop in order to generate the data. So here we go with the code. What we are going to do here is that we start with data. We want to create an empty list where we will put everything inside. Well, we'll create a data frame at the end of the day with this. So we make sure it's empty. Then we simply say for date in dates. So these are the dates. So it's going to take each individual date. And for each individual date, for example, for the first date, it's going to go on and input a particular region. For that particular region, it will choose an age group. For that age group, it will choose an indicator. For that indicator, it will choose a gender. And for that gender, it's going to give a value that goes from 0.1 to 100. So this is the range, and it's going to follow a uniform distribution. That's what it's going to do. So it starts with a date. For a given date, it will choose a region. For a given region, it will choose an age group. For that age group, it will choose an indicator. For that indicator, it will choose a gender. And for the gender, it will generate a random value. So it's going to iterate that for each date. So it's going to start here for the first month. Given that we've set monthly data, it will do it for January 2022, February 2022, until it gets to December 2023. And it will iterate it for dates for the different provinces, the different regions, provinces, of course, the age groups, and so on. So that's what it's going to do. And when it has done it and placed it in here, then we are going to generate a data frame from it. So we have data, which is what we've just generated here. We want it to have these following columns. We want date, we want region, age group, indicator, and of course, gender and value. So the value is the value we just generated from here. Okay, we have values there. Okay, so let's run it and try to see what is in it. So I'll just say df hit. At the end of the day, we want to see what came out. So I'll do Shift Enter. I hope I did Shift Enter for the first one. Did I? I'll run Shift Enter here. Shift Enter to run this first cell. And now I'll come here and do Shift Enter on this next one. And if everything works, so here we go. This is the synthetic data we've generated. We have date, region, age group, indicator, gender, value. So the next thing, we can just hit df info just to have some information about our data. Shift Enter. And we can see it's telling us what we have. The date is in date time 64. Region, object, so string. We have age group, and so on. So basically, we have these 6 different columns. Okay. Now, the thing we want to do is I want to progressively show you certain things. We want to iterate through certain computations we will be using. So now, for example, in this data set, we simply want to come and select. So you can see we are dealing with employment, unemployment, labor force participation. They are all in here. Now, if we want to only take a look at unemployment, exclusively unemployment, we don't want all of these different indicators. We want to focus on unemployment. How do we go about doing that? It's pretty straightforward. So we have the data, the df. This is the whole thing. Now, what we want to do is we simply say, go to this column where you have indicator and choose employment rate. Okay. We could, of course, use the query. It's going to give us more or less the same thing. For example, we could have said df cure query, and in here, we can simply define it as indicator. And here we can simply put employment rate. Let me just copy employment rate. We can put employment rate here. It should give you the same thing. So here, for example, let me just put a hashtag in front of here to comment this out. Let's run this one. You will see that it's going to give us, of course, hit 2 means, so when you simply do hit here, it gives you the first 5. When you can put 10, it will give you the first 10. When you put 2, it gives you the first 2. So let's run this. I'll do Shift Enter. And we can see everything here will just be employment. You could, of course, put tail because, of course, you see the date. It starts with January It's giving you, it starts with January, the male, female, and so on. Ontario, it will do that for the gender, for the provinces, for the age groups, and so on. Of course, I could decide to put tail here and do Shift Enter, and it's going to be giving me at the end of the year. But you see, it's always employment rate, what was chosen. So here I can as well put hashtag here and take this off. And of course put dot and in principle it should give me the same thing. Shift Enter. So you can use, if you like, if this is more understandable to you, go on, use the query if this is what is more understandable. But we will stick to the first one and let go of the query for the subsequent things we'll be using. Okay, so this is just to show you how we chain things. So the first thing we learn how to do is how to choose a particular indicator coming from a particular column. So we go to the column called indicator and we choose employment rate. That is how you do it. So now the next thing we want to do after we select this is to group this particular data. So we are going to group it by the different regions, because here it's just so that we have only one British Columbia and so on. So we are going to work on grouping it. How do we do that? We are going to chain it to what we have here, and we'll have a code that looks like this. So so this is the initial thing we are computing. Then from this particular table, we are going to group this table by the different regions. So if we do that, let me just say the first 10 so that you can clearly see the output. Let me do Shift Enter, and you can see how it has grouped it. So, okay, let's come here. You can clearly see that for January, you have Ontario, you have this particular age group, male, female. For Ontario, you have this particular group. So it has grouped it by the different regions. So once it does all the grouping by employment rate, male, female, you can see Ontario is all here, Quebec is all here, British Columbia is all here. It's not mixed up and down. Now the next thing we want to do is to ask it to extract only the value. Okay, we want the employment rate grouped by that, but to extract only the value. So I'll come here and I'll chain it again. So you are simply saying from this next column, so this is what we had initially, group by region. Now we want to extract the value. Okay, and of course I won't just say that, I'll leave it for it to give us the first 5. Shift Enter. And here we go. You can see here we have only the values which have been given. So this is just to show you this is to help you understand what we will be using for the subsequent analysis. Okay. So right now we want to answer certain questions. So by the way, I'll get rid of this because it's just taking too much space. This was just there to help you understand what we will be doing as we move on. So all of this, I'm getting rid of it. Actually, I'll click here, get rid of that, click here, get rid of that, and even click here, get rid of this. I'll even get rid of this info so that we have a clean slate. Okay, here is our data, here is the big. So a typical question you want to ask is, what is the average employment rate by the different regions? So here we go. What is the average employment rate by regions? How do you do that? You first of all select the employment rate and you group the employment rate by regions and you obtain the value. So and here I'm going to put it here in average employment rate by region. That's what I'm doing. Then I can print it to clearly see what's the value. So I'll do Shift Enter, and here it's telling me that the average employment rate by region looks like this. So you have British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec. Those are the values. That's the average by region. Now you can see that we only have 3 regions here. If you had all the 10 provinces plus the territories, it's going to list everything. That's what we will have when we are dealing with the real data coming from Stats Canada. But this is to show you how to go extract the employment rate and group it by region to be able to see just the value. And one thing I forgot to mention is we chain it with the mean, okay? This is the average. So you see how we chain things. So after seeing the average employment rate by region, we can also move on now to take a look at the average employment rate by gender. So we've done it by region, now we can do it by gender, and we can also do it by age group. So basically, that's what you have. How does employment rate vary by gender? On average, you can say that. And here we are having, you choose the unemployment rate. Okay, this is the case of unemployment rate. And we are looking at the different gender. We want the value and of course the mean. And then we print it to see the value. So I'll do Shift Enter. And here you can see it for male, female. Now, no, this is not the true value because this is just synthetic data we generated. It's not the real data, but that's how you go about it. And if you wanted to see it, let me just repaste that. And if you wanted to now see it by age group, okay, age group, then you know exactly what you should do here. It means where you have gender, you simply put age group, given that these are the age groups. This is what we have as age group. Of course, this is the title. That is the one you want to copy and place there. So rather than gender, let's just put age group here, and I'll do Shift Enter. And it gives me the average by the different age groups. So you go, you do your selection, you group it, you look at the value, and you take the mean value. That's how it rolls. Now let's take a look at labor force participation rate. Let's say we are interested in the region that has the highest labor force participation rate. So when we talk of labor force participation rate, we are looking at the age group that, well, the people who have the right to work and who are actually participating in the workforce. The workforce is just those who are employed and those who are unemployed. Of course, the unemployed, they are searching for a job. They are willing and able, but they cannot find a job. So they are part of the workforce, and the employed people are actually working. They want to work and they are working. Now, the labor force participation rate is just those who are qualified. In other words, who are within, in Canada, is above 15 years and are actually part of the labor force. Okay, I won't get into the complex explanation of that. So how do you go about this? We give it a name, maximum labor force region. So the first thing you do, you first of all choose. Under this indicator, you first isolate labor force participation. Then you group by region, given that we are looking at the region having the maximum. Then you take the value and you look for the max. And then you isolate really the max of the max. Okay? And that is basically what we are doing here. We are printing it. And you can see here, we've just put some text. We put comma, and we want it to come here and extract the value we've put here. Okay? That's just what we are doing. Shift Enter. And it simply tells us that the region with highest labor force participation rate is British Columbia. So it has chosen the particular region that has the highest, the maximum. So we look at the value and then it chooses the index. So this is index. Okay. So if you get rid of this, for example, it's just going to give you something like this. British Columbia, it will give you the regions and their max. However, with this, it's going to choose the index because this is the index and this is the value. So it goes and it takes the index of the maximum. That is why we have British Columbia, because British Columbia is like the index of the marks. Here, for example, gender, this is the index, this is the value, this is the index, this is the value. So that's what is happening here. All this explanation makes the video long, but it's to help you better understand what you're seeing. Now we want to start looking at some graphs. So we are going to look at the distribution of employment rate by age group. So here we have the distribution of employment rate by age groups. First of all, I give the size. So this is a Matplotlib. We have imported Matplotlib as PLT. That is what we have here as PLT. So here for the PLT object, I give it a figure size of 6 and 2. And then I'm going to use Seaborn. We want a box plot to see the distribution based on the box plot. And actually, I'll leave it like this. We can adjust it if we want. Then how do I look at the employment rate by age group? It simply means I first filter out the employment rate, and then I want age group and value. So employment rate by age group. So it will give me the value, and of course all of these are just labeling blah blah blah. Shift enter, and here we go. So here it shows the employment rate by the different age groups. So that's how you go about doing it, and we'll do it when we come to the real data. So we are going to do something very similar now, but not with employment rate. Let's take a look at the labor force participation rate. So in this case, we are looking at how does labor force participation rate vary by age group. So we want to look at how things change by age group. Here, for example, we want to first of all go and select the labor force participation rate, because that is what we are interested in. And now that we have the labor force participation rate, we are not going to do what we did here. We are not going to just select labor force participation rate and look at the box plot. We don't want to use a box plot. We want to use a heat map. So what we are going to do is to pivot the outcome. So when you have that selection, that table, we want to pivot it, and we want the index to be age group, because we want to take a look by age group and gender. So we pivot it by gender, and we give columns. We pivot by age group, columns, gender. So we are selecting this. We want the index to be age group and the column to be gender, and of course value, and we want the average. So it's going to compute the average using NumPy. And now once we have that, we can now go on to plot whatever we have received as our outcome. So now let me just give the code for the heat map. So this is a Seaborn heat map. It's coming from the data. This is what we have here. It's just what we've computed, and we want the heat map to be annotated, and we want the color of, well, I'll explain this when the map appears. We want it to use cool, warm, and of course these are just the labels. So shift enter, and here we go. Okay, it tells me there's a problem. What's the problem? I'm just going to bring this up there, and hopefully that should be fine. Shift enter. Okay, so here we go. We have this as a heat map. So what you have here as cool, warm is just this color that helps you understand the heat map. And you can see you have male, female, you have it's by age group. So you can see that the labor force participation you can see by age group, you can see that for female above 55, it's 45. For female between 45 and 54, this is it. For male, that is what it is. And you can use this scale, this gradient scale is there to just help you distinguish what is here very fast. So that's it for this one. Let's move on. Let's do another example with the heat map and with the pivot table. This time we are not going to be using labor force participation rate. We will be using unemployment rate. And here we go. We want to take a look at the average unemployment rate by age group and region. Here we did age group and gender. Now we want age group and region. So the first thing we want to do is to get a pivot table. Soon I will take this up, else we'll have the same error. So we want to first of all select the unemployment rate. We want to pivot unemployment rate with the index being the age group and the columns being the region. And of course we want the values, and the aggregation function will be the mean. Now let me take this up, else we will end up having another error. And for this, I'm going to be using a heat map. And of course, the data is what we've defined here, the average unemployment rate pivot table. I'm going to put it here. Annotation, yes, we want the graph to be fully annotated like this. And we want it to use the same colors we have here, the cool, warm. And of course, these are just some labels for the graph. So Shift Enter. Let's see what the problem is. So there are times when it's not happy when you start breaking down things. As I break it and put it on different rows, this works great on Jupyter. So I'll just bring it up there. Let's bring it here and see if it solves the problem. It just makes it pretty long. Okay, Shift Enter. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's clear I made some mistakes, because here immediately I'm starting with DF pivot, but actually I should do something very similar to what we have here. I should first of all choose this. So for here, I had to first of all come here and first of all choose that and not pivot it directly. So this is an oversight. So I am going to, because this is too long, I am going to break this into two. So I will first of all use this. Yeah, so here you can see it. So I'll break it. We have the filtered. I'll first of all filter the unemployment rate, and then I'll pivot that unemployment rate using the same thing. So the mistake was to try to do it immediately. That was an oversight. It should have been without this. Just first of all select that before pivoting. So this time it should in principle work, and then use whatever we have there now in this. So let's go Shift Enter, and there we go. So we basically have the average unemployment rate by age group. Okay, I think this video is getting a bit long. Of course, you have the different provinces, the age group, and the unemployment rate. So we'll continue in the next video.